passes 7-0. Thank you.
Action item number 3 is automated speed cameras.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Jones.
I move to receive and file the documents, receive the presentation, and approve the recommendation.
Second by Sprague.
Motion by Jones and a second by Sprank. Mike, please.
Thank you. City Manager Mike Van Milligan. Chief of Police Jeremy Jensen is recommending City Council implement automated speed cameras in the City of Dubuque. Traffic enforcement, particularly speed enforcement, is a frequent request of the Dubuque Police Department. The purpose of traffic enforcement, particularly speed enforcement, is to reduce the amount of motor vehicle crashes and reduce the severity of those crashes by ultimately changing drivers' patterns of behavior. Motor vehicle crashes cause not only impacts to individuals in the form of injuries and monetary loss, they disrupt traffic flow, potentially cause additional crashes, and take a great deal of staff allocation and time to complete. In 2022, the Dubuque Police Department investigated 1,510 motor vehicle crashes. 6 of those crashes were fatal car crashes, a 10-year high. Excessive speed was a contributing factor in almost all of these crashes. Data provided by the Governor's Traffic Safety Bureau shows that in Iowa, speed was a factor in many of the fatal crashes. Iowa State Patrol statistics for the last 3 years has shown an exponential increase in speed citations over 100 miles per hour. The police department receives on average 2 to 3 requests per week for speed enforcement. Currently, the department has 13 sworn officer vacancies. The department responded to over 50,000 calls for service in 2022. Traffic enforcement is a proactive activity with the necessity to respond to calls as a priority. Traffic enforcement is a secondary priority purely because of staffing issues. Police officer safety is an important issue. Traffic stops are one of the most dangerous activities officers partake in. Not only does the officer have to contend with an unknown driver, the officer also has to contend with other vehicle traffic. Additionally, traffic stops with flashing lights cause erratic behavior from drivers that has resulted in crashes as people slow, look, or erratically change lanes. Certain areas, such as Lower Dodge Street, that often generate speed complaints and are prone to crashes, are often difficult and dangerous for officers to work traffic enforcement without further impacting traffic patterns. Racial profiling, pretextual stops, are allegations made around traffic enforcement, as there is a human factor when an officer decides to stop a vehicle. Additionally, when an officer makes a stop on a motorist, the claim is that the officer has now missed 10 other violations. Automated speed enforcement cameras are common in many cities throughout Iowa, such as Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, and Des Moines metropolitan area, Waterloo, and Davenport, as well as a number of small towns. Cedar Rapids has had this technology for many years. Chief Jensen discussed the use and potential problems of the system with Cedar Rapids Police Chief Wayne German. Chief German advises that the system has had a positive effect on reducing motor vehicle crashes. On a particular stretch of Interstate 380, fatal accidents went from 5 per year to 1 in 10 years. Cons of the system include not being popular with some people. It is not perfect. However, as stated before, there is oversight. A police officer is required to review the citations. There is an appeal process. Citations are issued to registered owners. Some people argue this is not fair to the owner, as it may not be the owner driving the vehicle. Conversely, others would argue the owner is responsible for the use of their vehicle and who they allow to drive the vehicle. The benefits of automated speed enforcement include the following. First, it's 24/7, 365-day coverage of an area. Staffing does not allow for officers to sit in an area for this amount of time. Cameras are a force multiplier that offsets police department staffing issues and leverages technology. Second, there is a safety factor for both officers and motorists by not conducting physical traffic stops on often busy and high-speed roadways. Third, the cameras keep working during the time an officer would be out of service during that stop. Fourth, the citation is a civil citation, that does not count against the driving record. The ultimate goal is to not have drivers suspended for non-payment of fines, but to have accountability that ultimately changes driving behavior. And finally, there is minimal or no cost to the city. The vendors of these systems do not charge for the installation or maintenance, as they are paid by a percentage from each ticket issued, roughly 35% depending on the vendor. The benefit is this is a standalone system, not related to our traffic camera system, that is maintained by the vendor. The original submission of this memo, since the original submission of this memo, I've been asked multiple questions. My intent would be to recommend any revenue go towards traffic safety expenses throughout the organization and the community, including in public works, where we have 2 full-time traffic technicians to maintain the traffic lights and the existing traffic cameras, in engineering, where we have traffic engineers, existing traffic camera staffing, design, maintenance, computer storage, software, and maintenance of the system. The police department has a 3-member traffic unit and ancillary expenses. And then continuous planning, maintenance, and implementation of traffic safety enhancements throughout the community. Traffic safety includes the safety of the motoring public, bicyclists, and pedestrians. The City Council budgeted in fiscal year 23, the current fiscal year, to create 2 new positions to deal with diversion through the City of Dubuque notice of violation system and the court system, so people can reduce their fines or avoid jail time by doing community service. One of the new positions is to connect with people who need diversion services, and the other is to develop a community service system so there is a system in place for that diversion to exist, and so that successfully performing that community service can be tracked. In the case of normal speeding tickets issued by a police officer, not through automated speed enforcement, a person speeding at 11 to 15 miles over the speed limit would be subject to a $175.15 fine. Higher speeds increase the fine. With automated speed enforcement, let's assume the fine for going 11 to 15 miles over the speed limit is $100, with higher fines for higher speeds, but the percentages I'm about to describe could still apply. The company providing all the equipment and processing the violations would get an estimated 35% or $35 of the $100, and there is no way to divert that through community service. However, my recommendation would be that the violator have the opportunity to divert 50% or $50 of the $100 fine. So of the remaining $65 through community service, $50 could be diverted. The 15% or remaining $15 the city keeps would be used to cover the cost of the diversion program and any remaining going to traffic safety expenditures. The community service diversion opportunity would not only be for low-income people, but all violators. In this example, there would be a $100 fine for automated speed enforcement for exceeding the speed limit between 11 to 15 miles per hour over the speed limit, but the person could do community service to avoid 50% or $50 of that cost. Even if this is approved tonight, it is not the last time it would come before the City Council. Prior to any implementation, an ordinance would be required. The ordinance would cover the implementation, the fines, the limitations on the minimum speed enforced, etc. And as you're well aware, you can do ordinances in 3 readings. So if you were to approve this recommendation tonight at the February 20th City Council meeting, would come back to you an ordinance for you to review, and then you would have 3 meetings, including February 20th, to consider that ordinance. The first meeting in March, and then the March 20th meeting, at which would be the 3rd reading, when you could decide if you were going to adopt the ordinance and then officially actually implement this program. I concur with the recommendation and respectfully request Mayor and City Council approval to implement automated speed enforcement, and Chief Jeremy Jensen does have a presentation.
Thank you, Mike.
if I can find it. Again, Mr. Mayor, City Council staff, Jeremy Jensen, Chief of Police, and I will get this up and going here. All right, let's wait for them to kick it on here.
We see it up here.
There it goes.
We good? All right.
There it goes. So the first question is why? I'm going to get it to go here. Maybe.
Your arrow.
Yeah, try it that way. Yeah, it's not going. Well, they're fixing this, but I guess the first question I'll just say is why? Why do I bring this to you? So I think your tasking to me as police chief is to look for public safety options. Plain and simple, that's my job, is to do public safety. As I said before, there's looking at ways to be more effective and efficient. That's one of the things that I need to do. Always looking how to do things better. I love the word that was used tonight. I was going to use contentious, but the word interesting is actually a better word. I like that word. So whoever said that I like that word because it is interesting. This started for me. So if you remember back in July, we had a high-speed crash on the Northwest Arterial that claimed the lives of three young people. And so at the end of September, we did a joint press conference with the Iowa State Patrol, the Sheriff's Office, the Governor Traffic Safety Bureau. During that conference, or after that conference, one of the mothers of the persons involved in that came to me and said, "What can we do? We got to do more. We got to do more." Like I said, I can't sit out there. She told me the Northwest Arterial is a bad place. This is what happens. This racing along here, and what can we do? That's other things we can do. So I started looking. What are other options we have to do this? We can throw officers out, but again, we're not there 24/7, and I'll talk more about that. Like I said, it's force multiplier. Quite frankly, it covers areas that we can't cover, and I'll cover some more of that, why that is. I'm just point this out. Speeding is a choice, plain and simple. It requires a driver's input to put their foot on the gas and go. I'm going to say this before even asking this. I'm asking drivers to slow down, voluntarily slow down. We don't even have to have this. I'm asking for them to voluntarily slow down. I said this during that press conference. If you just slow down, we don't have this as an issue. So here's some studies that kind of show it. And the thing with studies, and I want to throw this out with traffic safety studies, there's a lot of nuances that go with crash data. So speed can be a factor in one, but then type of vehicle, so weight of vehicle, and I'll show you some of that with that. Safety, the age of the vehicle. Newer vehicles are safer. They're designed to be, they're crash tested with more safety things. Seatbelt use. That's another factor that plays into that. Distracted driving, and I'm not just talking about cell phones. And then, the state's got some legislative going with that, but there's also the other things. What is distracted driving? Music, playing with the radio, eating. There's distracted driving that goes into that. And a lot of that plays into crash is because there's reaction time. Recognizing when something is going to happen and be able to react to that takes time. And if I'm doing something else, there's even split seconds or seconds change a difference on that. It changes the amount of time it takes or the amount of distance it takes to stop on crashes. Add speed to that, and you can see where that actually starts to change some of that. And again, I'll show you some data with that. But these are some studies, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the National Traffic Safety Bureau throughout. These are back from 2017. The one on the left is more of how to do a system, how to get a system up and going. I want to point out, this is not in lieu of traffic stops. There is benefit. As one gentleman pointed out, there is benefits to doing traffic stops. We find other things, quite frankly, that go on with that. This is just speed. It's not everything else that goes on. I talk about the other safety factors. The GTSB is talking about, slow down, put it down. the electronic devices, seatbelt use, and then move over. And I'm going to talk about safety and the safety being alongside the road, particularly any roadway workers in general on that. So it talks about that, but it really does point out some things that you need to work on where you put them. You got to decide that. Use your data to decide where you're going to put these cameras. Identify where the problems lie. The transparency. My mind, there's no secret to these things. They go out, we tell you exactly where they're at, and multiply. Again, the whole idea is if we never issue a citation, we're winning. Because with that, people are slowing down. We're not issuing citations within it. And then just documentation of it and keeping track of it. And then looking at the data and say, you know what? The nice thing with these things is they go in and they can come out. We can move them. We don't have to, or we don't need, and maybe we just say we're done with it. The NTSB study, it focused on some things. Again, with these crash nuances, but speed increases the likelihood of serious and fatal crash involvement. Speed increases the injury severity of a crash. These are all basic physics. The involvement of speeding passenger vehicles in fatal crashes is underestimated and underreported. It's hard for us to figure out if somebody's speeding on a lot of these crashes. Again, 10 miles an hour. You can do some things with crash data. You can look at that. Our current traffic system, which are the camera system, I want to point out, we don't look at that for speeding. It's not designed for that. It's not calibrated. It's not any of that. We can look at what the causation of the accident. We might have a good idea if somebody's really speeding. You can kind of figure that out. But that's there. And they need to be highly publicized. Increased enforcement is an effective measure. I did traffic enforcement for 3 years. I know you can do some things with that, but I was one person doing that on a whole city of Dubuque. Speed kills. You've heard this. Here is the physics behind it. This is simple physics. We want to point out kinetic energy because kinetic energy is what causes death. I want to point out on the right there the weight of the vehicle. So we have the formula there for the kinetic energy. But look at the difference. So if you look at a 4,000-pound vehicle, that's the average vehicle weight. Traveling at 45 miles an hour, you can see the kinetic energy, 270,000 plus foot-pounds. The same vehicle traveling at 65, 20 miles an hour or more. So it's not double, but you start to get into that range where it's doubling the kinetic energy. The speed's not doubling. That goes up. Kinetic energy is the impact. Again, that's what happens. Again, it can be mitigated through seatbelt use, the vehicle makeup, and some of that sentiment. But this is the things that do that. Now look at 80,000 pounds. That's a commercial motor vehicle on that. 25 miles an hour, 1.6 million foot-pounds. Increase it by 10 miles an hour, and you're up over 3.2. That's why you see semi. Oh, don't ever get hit by a semi. That literally is it. That points that out. So I want to point that out there because, again, I think it's important to show why speed enforcement is important. This is what the city manager alluded to. The one on the left is the Iowa State Patrol. They used this at that press conference. Speed over 100, crazy. Quite honestly, in 2020, what they're saying what happened there is because of COVID, and we weren't doing traffic stops because we didn't know if we were going to get COVID from talking to people all across the state. Look at the number. They called it a free-for-all on the interstates, is what they called it. And you see that number really, it's gone down, but not a whole lot, not where it was at. And you look at those speeds, crazy, crazy speeds. 79 in December, over 150 miles an hour. That's crazy. So you see that. You've seen these numbers. The crash fatalities, and I want to point out with this is from the Governor's Traffic Safety Bureau, and it's by county, so we had 12 fatalities. That does not mean the number of crashes, mean the number of people died. 338 people lost their lives in 2022. Some of those crashes had multiple people in them. So that's not the amount of fatal crashes, it's the amount of people who died in crashes. So what they came up with is that 79 were speed-related crashes. Again, so 338 people and 114 were not wearing their seatbelt. This is our crash data from Dubuque, and there's a lot more. We have a lot more of this. I want to just kind of emphasize it quickly. You can see where the crashes are in the city of Dubuque and where the concentration is on the left there. The other one just shows the chart, just a trend since 2011 and 2013, where our crashes has gone up. We don't know why in 2021 they dropped down so much. We don't have a clue, actually. We can't, we're trying to figure that one out, but they're on the rise again. And actually our enforcement is on the rise and we're still seeing accidents. So the correlation with that. This is actually from the ICAT, which is Iowa State Traffic Center. They do a lot of the crash analysis. And so I just want to show some of the roadways. This is Highway 20 in 2022 and then 2023 to date, which was just last week. This is the concentration. What I'll point out there is Lower Dodge, because that was one of the areas I emphasized. As you look on the right, that is Lower Dodge, and that's where the concentration of the crashes are happening. This is all of Dubuque County on that. Here's another area I talked about, 15161, same time frame. This is just centering around essentially the downtown and from the Wisconsin Bridge, and you can see where those are starting to concentrate again. You can see Dodge Street kind of playing into that. You know, there's a number of things that go with these ones. Get some of this. There's intersections that play into this, but as you know, downtown Dubuque, it's tight. There's a lot of buildings close to the intersections. Sometimes it's hard to see. You add speed to that, and again, that reaction time and that time to stop slows down. It's harder to react because all of a sudden you have a car there. And so I want to point that out as the issue. And again, if we design roadways to plan streets, that would be great. But again, I don't see us moving buildings back away from corners. Here's the rest of 151. This is going to just south, or this, actually I take it back. This is the fatals or serious accidents in the 151 corridor in that time frame. Again, serious injury can really anything that's incapacitating or permanent. And so you can see where these are kind of at here. And this one then is the Central Avenue, Highway 3. I want to point that out as being where this is just going farther north on the same streets. I point out traffic volumes because we got a lot of traffic using the roadways. And this came from engineering. This was actually in 2021, I believe July, on these different streets. So you can look at the amount of traffic using and this is one day, using our roadways during that day. So we got a lot of vehicles on some of these areas, and that's vehicles and anything we can do to mitigate, like I said, those four main areas. Complaints. The city manager alluded to this. We get 3 formal requests per week for speed enforcement or speed shield placement. Now I'll talk about the speed shields. Speed shields, you see them, we put them on the signs, they tell you how fast you're going, right? They're just data. They don't do anything else. So all we know is how fast somebody's going with that. We can record some data with it, and we use that to determine, we put them particularly in neighborhoods, but again, they just show speed. That's it. And so, you know, we always, you can see through our data, you always see like, here's the speed, the average speeds, and you'll see somebody that I think really just wants to see how fast they can make the sign read. And again, it's not generally, we're not sitting there with that. The informal request. This I get a lot of the informal request. Dodge Street's dangerous. Dodge Street's that's one also been called a racetrack, a speedway. Northwest Arterial is a racetrack. When the lights, this one just came in this week, when the lights turn green at 17th, Central becomes a drag race to get to the next light. Kids play in this neighborhood and one of them is going to get killed. I hear that one a lot on neighborhoods kind of thing. And again, what I proposed in the memo is just areas that I know of, but there's also other areas that are just, as we talk about, you know, like school zones, hear that one quite a bit. And that came up, particularly on our major roads like Pennsylvania or South Grandview at Bryant. Kids crossing the big wide street there and people not slowing down. So these are ones that come up quite frequently. Talked about this being a force multiplier. So it takes about 10 minutes for an officer to do a traffic stop. Okay? To make the stop, make the thing, write the ticket, and issue the ticket. As we heard, it is, and having done traffic, and I've been in law enforcement 30 years, you hear, you should have got that one. Did you get that one? Did you get that one? You know, we're not getting all of those. It requires us to pick one and go. I'm with that. Heavy traffic, we talked about safety, heavy traffic congestion. Okay, it's hard, for one, to get out on cars during that, weaving in and out. Even with lights and sirens, still dangerous. Think Lower Dodge Street, there's no shoulder. There's nowhere to pull somebody over on that. Heavy congestion. Now you got traffic trying to shove over into one lane that's heavy. Officers out there, the person you stopped is there, and it becomes dangerous to do things in that area. And again, as the city manager said, people, lack of a better word, gawk, and they look, and then boom, they crash again. That has happened frequently. Any officer can tell you that I've been on an accident where another accident's happened, and for no reason other than somebody wasn't paying attention on that. Like I said, not enough officers to cover it, and that's what started. The other part of this is looking at that. What can we leverage with the technology to do with not enough officers to be there? You hear this as soon as you left. It started right up again. Of course, the squad car's not there anymore. There's no flashing lights. Of course it happens again. You should have been here yesterday. You should have been here at 2 o'clock, not 1 o'clock. You should have been here, whatever. That is pretty common because, again, we're not sitting there all the time. The placement in the locations where the traffic, like I said, difficult and dangerous, and I talked about Lower Dodge. There's other places with that. But then it's equally enforcing. And, again, I talked about that. It's essentially citing, not stopping. It's citing pretty much everybody, and it's not just one, and then, I felt like I got treated unfairly because I'm the one that got singled out and got stopped by the officer. Again, this is still going to happen because this does not replace that. So how do they work? So we talked, and that's the thing with this. There's still a process that needs to happen, which isn't part of this. This is me proposing this idea. So there's fixed and mobile locations, and right after I'm done here, I'm going to have Dorian Grubaugh from Jenoptik, who is a vendor, but he's here just to explain the technology so you understand the technology. We have not picked a vendor yet, which we have not done any of that. We have not settled on anything, but he's here to explain the technology because I think that's important to understand. Because in 2012, when we looked at red light cameras, the technology wasn't there where it was. It wasn't challenged. It wasn't, the backside wasn't there. It wasn't good. So, of course, that fell apart. But now it's a lot different. So there's fixed and mobile locations. So there's fixed, and then there's also mobile. Remember, we used to have a speed trailer that you'd put out and has signs. You see them out in the county. I think they have one. And it'll show your speed. You can move it around. There's actually a version that has the mobile speed camera on it, so you're able to do that. So you can move it to areas that do that. But part of that is the complete public transparency. If you see other places that have the mobile ones, this is going to be this place on this day and this time. They put it out. We're not going to hide it. Again, if you voluntarily slow down, great, no problem. It's a civil violation, as you alluded to. The thing with that is it doesn't count against your driving record. And we talk about some equity components there. 3 moving violations in the state of Iowa. Within a 12-month period, you lose your driver's license. This doesn't count on that. And it doesn't count against insurance is the other part of that. Insurance companies don't know that it happened, quite honestly. There is fines. There is fines with that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the fines are set. There's appeal processes that go with that. If you look at some of the ordinances that are out there, I mean, what happened with I'll get to that in a minute, actually. I'll cover that in a minute. But there's appeal process, and then the crash severity reduction. Again, it's about severity, and not necessarily reducing crash, but reducing the severity of them. The fixed and mobile locations, they're collaborative placement based upon, and collaborative, I mean by that, engineering, traffic planners, all the people coming together and saying, these are the best spots, we need to do this for one reason or another. Does the roadway, we need to have something because of roadway design. Do we need to have something because of the complaints that are coming in on this? And then obviously using our data and our traffic studies with that. The complete public transparency. I can't emphasize that enough because that's the point of this. The point is to voluntarily change a driver behavior. So publicize locations, warning periods, signage, year-end report that spells out everything that has happened with it. And part of that is reviewing our data to see if it is effective. Can we see a reduction in what's going on there? We have a baseline. Again, there's a lot of nuances with that, and that's the caution with it, but are we seeing some of that? Are we seeing that, yeah, we didn't issue any citations here, so obviously it's working. There's things here. Do we move it, remove it, or move it? No. The civil violation, I talked about this a little bit, does not go on the driving record or affect insurance. It goes to the registered owner. We talked about that, what the benefit or the negative of that is. I use an example of that. And some people say shouldn't go to the registered owner. My daughter got one. She called me. It's my car. She said, I got one of these. What do you want to do about it? I said, pay it. Plain and simple. You need to pay it. It ain't mine. And so that's how I base that upon. Can you be contested? Various options, depends on what ordinance and how we write the ordinance, but there's options to contest it, and the city manager gave that option through the diversion, which is a great way to. Now, I will say the unpaid fines go to collection and Iowa offset program. I do want to cover that quickly because that was part of one of the, this has been challenged in state and federal court. These systems have already, and upheld, but with some caveats. So the collections, it has to go through the court. So we can't just do a go to collection. If you don't pay your fine, because that's what happens. What happens if they don't pay it? We're not going to send it collections. It has to go through the court. It's the municipal infraction part of that. You go to court, and the court can order collections. And the Iowa offset program, which is where it sets against your tax return and things like that, where they'll withhold that kind of stuff, or casino winnings, that kind of thing. But it does not, we're not sending it automatic to collections. It's through the option of somebody using the court system, and the court orders the collection side of that. Here's some of the civil fines. We kind of talked about them. I did reach out to Waterloo today, and I don't know if that's totally updated. I asked for them to update that. But Des Moines, is, you can see how they do theirs. Cedar Rapids has it set for 1 to 5 over and all the way through, and they actually address construction zones. So, and there's the one thing you ask what 1 to 5 seems a little bit less. Generally, where I see that being used is school zones. Where it's just where there's a lot of kids crossing the street and 5 miles an hour can make an impact. I'm not recommending that or saying that. I'm just saying this is something that it can be used for. And the construction zones. I want to point that out because our officers, when they ran the Northwest Arterial this summer, working traffic in that construction zone that was out there, they said they could not turn around fast enough on the speeders that were going through there in the construction zone, which we know exponentially creates dangerous problems. This is the state of Iowa scheduled speeding fines. This is what happens if an officer stops a person. This is the fines that get associated with that. As you can see, 1 to 5 over 89.50, 6 to 10, 118.25, and then it just goes up, and then goes up quite a bit. So that's the difference in the two. There's actually more fine here than there is in the civil side. So here's some of the appeal processes, because I know this is important. Waterloo, as within 30 days, can challenge in writing, officer review for a decision, or within 30 days can request a municipal infraction for a court date. And then you can hear it in court. Cedar Rapids, pretty much the same thing. Council Bluffs had a little bit different. They threw out that within 30 days you can challenge in writing, and the city attorney review the decision. So a little bit different on that. But as far as I could tell, they did not have the municipal infraction option with that. Actually, let me point out one thing that Council Bluffs, their city attorney said, the whole point is, I just want people not to do it. That's it. So I don't care about the fine. I care about that they just don't do it again. So that was part of the city attorney decision. Crash severity reduction. So this doesn't show up in the Cedar Rapids study for the year. Why? Because they didn't have any. This is over a period of time. And Chief German, ironically, worked on the East Coast where there's a lot of these and implemented in a big county in the Maryland area back when he was there. And he said these are truly do work. Like he said, they went from these 5 fatalities a year to 0. And the one that the city manager alluded to was actually not speed related. That happened. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, automated speed enforcement is an effective countermeasure to reduce speeding-related crashes, fatals, and injuries. And then again, said the same thing, the lack of state-level automated speed enforcement enabling legislation and restrictions on the use in states where legislation exists have led to underuse of this effective speeding countermeasure. Again, the point is we're asking for people to voluntarily not do this. The next steps. We're not jumping into this. There has to be an ordinance passed first. We have to develop that. Then we need to start looking for requests for proposals for vendors. We need to review data for placement and see where that needs to go. DOT approvals, pretty simple approval process, but it still needs approval. Just need to do that. Public awareness campaign. Here's what's going to happen. Here's where it's going to be. Here's how long it's going to be in warning. I just saw the city of Hudson just this week said our warning period is over. It's starting. And then we're going to continue to monitor the legislation. You know, every year there's something in legislation about this. But in the last couple of years, we haven't really seen anything that really has effectively changed the use of them, more so just that those little tweaks, you know, about the backside of you know, how the appeal process goes and things like that. Now, I have Dorian Grubaugh here from Jenoptik. He's going to come up and he's going to give you the technology side of how these things work.
Good evening. I'm Dorian Grubaugh. I'm with Jenoptik. About me, before getting into the smart mobility or traffic safety industry, I was a police officer for 20 years and retired in 2012 and was recruited into this field kind of naturally because I spent half of it in the traffic division. So, that didn't do it. Oh, that's easier. Okay. I don't have a long presentation. I will try to get through this part. A lot of this is about questions and what questions might come up. I don't know the procedure here, but if you have any, I'm happy to answer them as we go so you don't have to wait or at the end.
Well, actually, we find that it's easier to let you finish the presentation,
Okay.
then we'll jump in. We'll write them down here. So thank you.
Absolutely. So again, I'm with Jenoptik. Jenoptik is a international company that has 3 different divisions, from automotive to the biggest division are optics and photonics. We always add this in here. We have the NASA contract. We've done all the optics and photonics on the Mars rover, so all the pictures you see from Mars came from equipment developed by Jenoptik. So, I mean, we're able to capture images and do things off planet. We've been doing them very well on planet as well. Moving further, what we're talking about tonight is the smart mobility division. What you're talking about with speed cameras is a smart mobility enforcement process, part of what you would call a Vision Zero campaign, the enforcement leg of the education, enforcement, and engineering. Everything going together to reduce speed. So as I've heard things here tonight, which I think are great, I think it's important to point out that the purpose of this program that you're considering is to reduce the amount of cars speeding on your roadways. The goal would be to reduce speeding by approximately 50% in the first year. That would be the goal, to reduce your accidents. It's been proven to do so. So the object here is not to, which is misgiven, is not to come in and see how much money can be made. The business model is to see if we can't cut how much money is being produced by the program so that we know that safety is happening, and all that can be delivered through numbers and data collected. Just to give a little bit about us so that you know who you're talking to, we are an international company. We have 6 regional units across the world. I represent the Americas, so North America, South America, the Caribbean. Our United States, or our North America, or our Americas division is out of Jupiter, Florida. There's over 4,300 employees worldwide. We've been around since the turn of the century. We've been doing speed and red light enforcement since the 60s in Europe. So since the inception and development of this type of technology, Jenoptik's been a part of it. We have in America just in the U.S. alone, over 3,000 sites. So of our 30+ thousand sites, over 3,000 are in the United States. Our system here, and I don't always, but I figured I'd bring it out because a lot of times it's always talk of the cameras and they're watching you and everything. So I thought I'd bring the the defendant, so to speak. And that's what we'll be talking about right there. That is a Vector SR camera. I mean, other vendors will have different versions of this, but it's just a piece of equipment that law enforcement uses, the force multiplier. It's just a tool belt, a tool in their tool belt. It's just something that could be utilized, and it's just an object. It's only watching, it's not watching people, it is watching a section of roadway, and that's all it's watching. Our camera happens to be able to do multiple things, so you'll see up here multiple things. Out of that one camera, you could do red light enforcement. We put school zone safety, but any type of spot speed enforcement, you could do point-to-point enforcement. It does have ANPR and ALPR on board. I'll get into that a little bit here in just a bit on the ANPR side, which is automatic number plate recognition versus automatic license plate recognition. I'll go over that. And then DVR recorded video, 24/7 monitoring. So, as I was saying, these cameras are built to watch a section of roadway or an intersection, depending on what you're talking about. Today we're talking about speed. So a section of roadway, approximately 100 meters, so just over 300 feet of roadway. This camera in particular, 3 lanes at a time. Bigger cameras, you get more lanes. But what it's doing is monitoring every moving object in that field of vision across that 100 meters or so. So, as we were talking before, police officer pulls out, gets one car. Why didn't you pull the others over? Well, I could only pull one over. This camera can write every single car within that 100-meter view across those lanes, whether it's 30 cars at a time or 176 cars. It has all of them. It does not take a break. It is there for as long as it's left there. With that said, it is absolutely not a replacement for law enforcement or traffic enforcement. It is only an aid. That's why in most laws it's written in. If an officer gives the subject a ticket that the camera also caught, the officer ticket is the one that gets processed and the camera ticket goes away. And that's there because traditional law enforcement and traffic enforcement with police is never meant to go away, not ever. This just lightens the load and provides 24/7 enforcement. With that is really basically how you reduce your numbers. People know that the cameras are there through the signage, through the news reports inevitably, through all the public awareness, and people will slow down. And as your program progresses or as you have it long enough, people stop trying to track where are the cameras so I just don't have to speed here. They just start driving more hyper-focused like they were when they were 16, and they're trying to obey every single rule. And that's what you're trying to get, is more compliance and people paying better attention as they're driving. I'll play this short little stint. This video is going to be a visual. Maybe. It's going to show you kind of how this works. Now, this, of course, came from our European friends, so as we're watching it, it's also for average speed or point-to-point speed. So you'll see the cameras, and all I would say is, in the enforcement you're looking at here, just imagine the camera's turned around looking at the back of the car, not the front of the car. In this, they're scanning them before they enter the zone, and as they move through, they would get to the second set of cameras, but that's determining average speed over a section of roadway, which we do a lot in Europe and is possible. But for here, spot, it's recognizing all these cars, and it's grabbing and holding the plates of the ones that are in violation, whichever has been set by the community or the police department. And it's doing that across all those lanes simultaneously for every car that comes by. Here is an example of sort of inside the camera what's going on. I said ANPR and ALPR, and that sometimes gets jumbled. ALPR is where it's scanning every plate and it can send alerts to police for wanted vehicles or whatever. Our cameras use what's called ANPR. It has ALPR as well. Not everyone wants to use that. It's a function that you just don't have to use, or it doesn't have to come with the camera. But our cameras do use ANPR, or number plate recognition, so it's actually reading the camera itself, and the artificial intelligence on board are identifying the vehicle and reading the plate as the car is going by, as it's getting, say, a violation. So if the car comes up as a violation or speeding over the threshold set, the camera has read the plate and identified the car and auto-processed that through the NLET system, basically the BMV, and put it into a ticket format and automatically send it on to the police for review. We also use, I don't know if you can see it that far back, but it looks like there's a lot of little lenses in here. That's all IR flash. We also use an external IR flashes depending on the darkness of the roadway. This video is actually specifically set up in an area where there were no lights whatsoever, and we didn't even add any external IR flash to it, just the 16 nodes that were in the camera, and we're still able to pick up the vehicle and the license plate without any exterior flash. I bring that up only because as the industry is trying to go away from the white flash that you see, which is also a distraction on the roadway. We do not use white flash in any of our systems anywhere in the world. Deep learning, artificial intelligence. Talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning. We have a very large AI engine that we've been developing for decades. What is it basically? Basically, it's if you could take a human brain and put it in a machine to not just do what you're asking it to do, but learn as you go. And by that I mean, we've all seen license plates. They might change, different things like that. Well, the artificial intelligence engine on board can actually see the new plate a few times and understand what it's looking at and then process it that way. It's also what is powering it to learn different things. An example would be as we program the camera in, say, a school zone to only operate for certain hours. Well, the AI engine on board is recognizing past just what we program it in. It's actually monitoring that, so if anything were to go wrong, the camera would recognize certain scenarios and know there was an issue. This is also more used on our civil security platform when we're talking about LPR. We're developing some things for Homeland Security, and that's when this really gets kind of technical. I won't bore you with that this evening, but that engine on board is what's able to read plates and recognize vehicles and process them automatically, so that the timeline, instead of being what used to be in the beginning of the industry, might be a couple of weeks before you can even get a ticket in the mail. That's why most laws say that you need to have that mailed out within 30 days of the instance. We try to cut that process by the system recognizing the plate, auto-processing the plate, putting it into the format for a law enforcement officer review. Once that review has happened, if the officer has deemed an event to have happened and needs to issue the ticket, they will approve that, which will put the officer's signature and badge number on the ticket, and then it will be mailed to the registered owner the very next day. These are some examples of machine learning or artificial intelligence versus conventional, and I know it says ALPR, you could say ANPR, just the way computers are reading things. Conventional technology looks at a letter or a number and it goes almost like you're clicking a typewriter. Artificial intelligence and machine learning scans the entire thing. It's if you've watched movies, you'll see sometimes a laser light going over something that's able to scan and read that, and it's neat in the movie, but essentially that's what's happening here. It's scanning the entire plate, and it's seen so many things that whether it's covered or rusted out or whatnot, in 99+% of the case, it has identified the plate number. If there is some question, it would kick over to a human for review. When we talk about these installations, nowadays there's many different ways, fixed or mobile. So you can put cameras on, you can either put in we could put in poles, we can go off of any existing street furniture to include light poles, school zone poles, telephone poles, highway gantries, and whatnot, or we can install our own pole and put cameras on that. On top of that are mobile solutions. So the mobile solution we use is a solar-based portable trailer, like the speed trailers that the chief was talking about earlier. They're actually basically on the same trailer platform. We have a solar panel on there that's charging some batteries in the box, and that trailer can be set out, and it was built to be able to set out and not need any maintenance or checking of the batteries for anywhere from 8 to 12 months, unlike other trailers in the industry. On top of the mast that you see there is a camera. One trailer can have a couple cameras facing each direction and cover an entire 4 to 6 lane roadway. We also generally will put speed signs on them, the same flashing speed signs, so that they'll flash when you're over whatever the set amount is that the city would want, so that the driver not only has seen a sign saying that you're photo enforcing in an area maybe, but they're also seeing the sign flashing at them as they're coming up before they're on camera, before they're going to be in the zone where the camera is, trying to get them to slow down before they're even there. Again, the goal is to get people to slow down. So these can be put up or taken down in 30 minutes or less, so they're very mobile and can be moved in within a couple hours to a new location. Your program, or any program, any photo enforcement program, and the one specifically in Iowa work this way, from start to finish. The company that is going to come in is going to provide you the equipment. They're going to put the equipment up. They're going to maintain the equipment. They're going to make sure the calibration is accurate, the daily testing. They're going to bring in the infractions, pass them off to the police. They're going to mail them for the city, collect the fines, and they're going to do a lot of back office work. So you have to have a very good back office, which we've had a back office, as they call it, the back office facility, or BOF. Over 20 years, been refined, and we have our own development teams, we do at least in the United States, that can customize this per community. So if there's something that needs to be developed different as far as reporting or what's going on in the back end for a community, depending on the type of reports they need, it's easily done. But through this system, quick and efficient evaluation of not just the incidents, but then there's also, as the chief was talking about, transparency of program. Finance can look up what's going on with different tickets that are out there. The police can look up how many tickets have been issued, how many, they can do that by month, by day, and you can print reports. So they'll be able to access reports. I know you put in there an annual report, but the police department should be able to report. They could do it on a daily basis if you wanted them to, but weekly, quarterly, by simply clicking in the time frame they want, and the system will give back how many tickets have been issued, how many vehicles have passed, and things of that nature. I say this with the warning program that was discussed earlier, and that's the baseline. So any program that goes in, you would have a 30-day warning period where warnings are mailed out, not tickets for money. Just another thing to get the public used to the cameras. That'll be your baseline. That's the baseline of what the problem is before the program starts. 3 months in, 6 months in, 9 months in, 12 months in. You'll be able to go and not just see, well, we only wrote this many tickets this month versus this many tickets last month, but 6 months ago, this is how many cars went past this camera during that time frame, and this month, this is how many cars went past. So it actually breaks it down further and gives you a percentage. We've reduced speeding by this percentage because the traffic's the same and the speeding problem is less. The chief was talking about COVID, and yes, I worked for a different company then, but I was shocked to see that everyone in the industry was saying, well, we should have a lot less tickets coming up. No one's on the roadways. And the traffic was significantly less, but I will tell you the amount of tickets written were much more. Okay. We're maintaining and managing all the data from the program, so everything. And I do mean everything. If somebody mails in with their ticket a letter, that is kept photographed and kept in a file. When somebody receives a notice, they'll be able to go to a site and view the same evidence that the police looked at. So the same photographs, the same video, whatever it is, they will see the exact same thing, and it'll be available to them. All the records that are for each of those cases will be available to that person. I mean, not the public, but that person that was issued the ticket. Same information the police has, the same information the city has. Everyone has the same information. Processing flow, I discussed a little bit. And this is where I talk about the process getting much better, and especially with usage of the ANPR technology. You have an event that happens today, and it used to be that over the next week, it would be processed by a human being, sent to the police, given another 5 to 7 days for them to process and get it mailed out in this weekly process. An event captured today by one of our cameras would be auto-processed today by one of our cameras and put into the system for law enforcement to check off within a day. Once they've reviewed it, the minute they accept, if they reject, the ticket is rejected. They've put reason for rejection and it's gone. If they accept it, the very next day it's mailed out. So with no hiccups, that process could be 3 days before a ticket's in the mail, which in the industries, I know it's not immediate, but it's very quick. These are, again, as the chief mentioned, civil violations, so they're more like a parking ticket. But where you get the enforcement benefit is what I talked about before, the signage and just having them out there and people knowing that they're there. And especially if you have mobile platforms that you're moving, even when you're updating that daily, people in most of the cities I've ever worked or seen, the reason that comes down is people just decide when they're in those communities they're just going to drive a little bit more cautious. This is an example of a ticket. It doesn't matter. These don't vary company to company. It's pretty standard, not just in the state of Iowa, but across the United States. All the notices of liability look pretty much the same. There is a continuity in the industry and a standard way of doing things. Back office also with financial reports, statistics, payment portals. The payment portal is what I talked about. That's where citizens would go and they'd be able to review your ordinance. They would be able to see what the evidence that was collected or the ticket. They have a copy of it. They'd also be able to see the pictures online. They would be able to request a hearing date if they wanted. They would be able to pay the fine, and they would be able to see any type of correspondence that's gone out. So if they didn't answer the first notice and they got a second notice and they were wondering, well, this couldn't have been sent out, they would see that it was, they would see when, they would see all of that there. Everything, again, is very transparent. Reporting of every instance in the program, from ticket issuance to payments to statistics afterwards to a court hearing manager, because in most municipalities in Iowa, usually there's kind of a mediation hearing first with the individual. Again, these programs are not to take the human out of the process. So if somebody has some mediating, circumstances, they can go to the police directly. I was rushing to the hospital. I was whatever the instance is. And law enforcement has the last say. If they say, okay, we would not have issued a ticket here, they can cancel that ticket out. If it gets to the mediation hearing, the mediation person would be able to mediate that with the person. And if that does not, both parties can't agree, then it moves on to municipal court, as the chief was saying. So in these programs that you're looking at, what you should be looking for is turnkey. Pretty much 98, 99% of everything provided by the vendor, which is what we do. The police department's providing the manpower because the law enforcement officer does have to review. And this is a partnership. This is not a company coming in saying, this is how many cameras we think you should have, this is where we think they should go. It's actually the reverse. We come in and work in partnership with law enforcement and engineering and ask, where are your problems at? These tickets cannot produce revenue. They can't just produce revenue from a roadway. You have to have a problem there. The only revenue comes because tickets are issued. Tickets are only issued because somebody's going a certain miles an hour, certain mile per hour over the speed limit that law enforcement has set. So the companies like ours, we especially do not set anything. We're coming to work for the municipality. The only input we put in is if you have a location, our engineers might say, well, we can't put a camera right there. We can put it 15 feet this way, something of that nature. Whatever the threshold is picked by the municipality. Whatever the fines are, picked by the municipality. And again, I'll reiterate, this program should be completely free. No money should be, no checks should be written to us or any vendor from this program. These are violator-funded programs. Our percentage that the city manager talked about is on paid fines. And that's where we get the revenue to be able to supply all of this, where we don't need anyone to write a check. So I know I kind of rushed through that. This has been a long evening for you. I wanted to just get you some general information, and usually it's not what I'm presenting. There's usually a lot of questions, and I'm happy to answer any of those for you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Chief, do you have anything else to add before we discuss?
Here for questions.
Okay. All right. Questions and discussion. Mr. Sprink.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, so if I kind of asked this question, I didn't quite, maybe you can answer it yet. When a fatal crash happens, what type of manpower are you looking at, and like how much time does that take for your staff?
Yeah, that's a good question, because my background's also accident investigation. Now it's also the city managers, ironically. So, but this is it takes. So, give an example. So we had a semi tip over on the South Mixmaster, which is where 151, 61 come together, scattered out a pretty lengthy period. To do it traditionally on that. So now we have a road closure of a major roadway because we have to measure that. We need to set up a baseline. So we need a couple officers just to do it. You need to take photographs. We need to take a baseline, do measurements. You're talking multi hours. That's just 2 officers working that, possibly 3, probably to speed that up. And then the road closures, depending on how big the road is and where the detours need to be. So you're taking more officers into that. So it could be just a road closure, easy one, or it could be multiple locations because now we need to detour up and we got to let people know where to turn off because we just put them into a residential area and things like that. So it could be a lot of officers and over multi-hours. Again, where does that affect? That affects commerce, for one, because traffic can't move through there. We closed it down and now it slows that down. Changing a traffic pattern can increase accidents on that. Again, our staffing that goes into that. Now, do we leverage technology? We have ability with some drone stuff with the State Patrol to do that a little quicker. But it still takes staffing, and this still is an impact to the roadway and the motoring public with that.
I did have one more
Yeah, go ahead.
For Dorian. Okay, so I get the business model, reduce speed. I like that. Say theoretically in 5 years, you're not issuing any tickets. Then what do you do with the things? You just leave them up there? Do you be like, you want to void your contract with us? What would happen then? So if that's the ultimate goal is to reduce speeding, and all of a sudden it turns into you're not issuing any citations, then what happens? Because you have all this data.
I totally get the question. I've gotten it before, and it's a hard one to answer because I've never seen it happen. And that's only because, unfortunately, until such time as the technology has gotten until the cars really are driving yourself and it's set at a speed, and therefore there is no speeding, the utopia of no one going over or driving aggressively hasn't happened. Somebody's always going to be in a rush. the volume going down, so more so to say, you know, the volume, is there a volume and a revenue number that gets to a certain point where we go, oh, we're not making enough? No. No. So even if it was just a trickle and we really had gained this success, no, we would actually want our cameras to stay. Most likely, in what we've seen, they've already been paid for through the program. So we would want them to stay because it's gaining your compliance. I have seen them go down. If you take that Cedar Rapids study, which I'm very familiar with and have worked with them, during that almost 2-year period where they, quote unquote, turned the cameras off because they weren't enforcing. The cameras weren't off, they were still running, they just weren't enforcing. And speed within 7 days went up 30%. Because some people thought the cameras weren't going to write them tickets. So, no, we would not want to pull the cameras from you.
Thank you.
Ms. Russell.
Thank you. Well, I had a giant list of questions, and those presentations really answered a lot of them, but I still have a list of questions, so I'll just start with a couple. I think, Dorian, it was you that said our goal is to reduce speeding by 50%. Do we have a goal, and is that it? I mean, I always like to know, okay, what are we trying to achieve so that we can see if we're effective? And can you clarify?
There's a lot of variations that go. It depends on the roadways you're looking at. A lot of times it's the transient traffic coming through. So if you have a roadway where different people are coming through every single day, it's harder to gain compliance with somebody when they only come through once. So you'll have that residual number. When I say 50%, it's because we're shooting fairly high, fairly quick. You know, the averages are that a speed program can start reducing your speed anywhere from maybe 15, let's be better, 20% to up to maybe 70% in the first year, the first 2 years. We're really shooting at Jenoptik for 50% in less than 12 months is what we're hoping is the outcome. We're shooting for big results, and we do that with the work and the cooperation we do with the municipality to make sure that the program, it's not, the other thing it's not about is not about how many cameras you can put up. It's not about putting 45 cameras up because you can. It's how do we put the cameras up. It's almost like when you think about security, where can we put things to get the best value or the best thing that we're trying to achieve. The same thing in speed enforcement. Where can we put these in our problem hotspots that will gain that compliance, and then maybe utilize some other measures around to gain more compliance. But it's, you know, traffic safety starts on those main roads that they go for, and then with the trailers you can move some around, and you're gaining just as much compliance without having to inundate a community with dozens and dozens or hundreds of cameras.
Okay. Well, then a related question to Chief Jensen then. In your next steps, could you add to that a reporting process so that you would be coming back to us saying, you know, this is how the cameras are doing?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I put the year-end report because that's what I've seen. But again, if we have the ability and we can pull it monthly or quarterly or whatever, that would be another way we can do that. And for sure, that's, like I said, I'm all about the complete transparency of it, and I'm all about the results of it if we're seeing that, and so we can all see if there's actually results coming from this.
Okay, I'll wait to see what other people have questions.
Sounds good. Thank you. Ms. Barber.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And Jeremy and Dorian, thank you for your presentations. I do have to let you know that I have a small business here in Dubuque that is at the corner of an intersection of two major streets, University and Delhi. And we consider ourselves at the restaurant basically the poster child for speeding enforcement. And there doesn't go a day without a close encounter or injury or potential accident or crashes. Over 8 years, we have seen them almost monthly. So we are so appreciative of the opportunity to have some kind of speed enforcement that will not only save lives or just make it more safe for the neighborhood residents and for the patrons. So I just wanted to share that with you because I see it and walk through it almost every day. So that being said, I wanted to thank everyone that sent us emails and everybody here tonight that gave us conversation and comments that kind of helped provide some of the questions. And I think a lot of those have been answered tonight. But on behalf of those groups, I was wondering, is there an opportunity on your list, Jeremy, to create an advisory committee of some of these local merchants, some of these local businessmen, some of the interested residents maybe, to have a collaborative partnership as you're determining some of those parameters for the system and the solution that might be created by someone like Dorian?
And I think that's absolutely what we're looking for is public input into that, you know, and that's, like you said, one of the areas is complaints, and that comes from the public input.
Sure.
You know, and for sure. So I think there's opportunity to be able to look at that and
Okay.
review. Again, I caution that it has to be people understand, because we talk about the emotional side of that.
Sure.
You know, we don't want that to. We really want to use what is out there. But yeah, I think that absolutely there's an opportunity.
Even just an open house or a forum might be of interest. Yeah. And I did want to let you know that I did some research today at the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, which is kind of like the NTSB, but only for insurance providers, that actually does some of the same research. And it was pretty much in parallel, Jeremy, I think, with what you had mentioned in terms of the decrease in percentage of crashes, and just the overall awareness when those campaigns are out, those marketing campaigns are out, that makes more of the drivers accountable based upon their research. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. And they also had a comment about a constituency advisory commission set up of local businesses and residents to assist. So I appreciated the fact that when I did that research, and this is 2020 data, that it included some of the same points that you had made. So again, thank you for that, and I'll look forward to hearing more and about more next steps as well.
Mr. Resnick.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I have questions, and I'll save my comments for later. First of all, Mr. Grubaugh and Chief, your presentations weren't in our packet today. Unless I have an old, like I have had, an old agenda, does everybody else have their presentations?
No.
Because so we weren't able to look at them and formulate questions with all the, I mean, look how long we've gone, and they went as fast as they could. So this is an enormous topic. Now my questions. You know, you talked about crash data, and I saw the maps. Do we talk about personal injury versus property damage in those crashes? So you can take that out.
I can get that info. Yep.
Why don't we have speed shields, if that's what you call those, like going down Dodge, and it says how fast it is right now? I don't know how many speed shields we want, but I think your idea that maybe some teenagers want to see a big number, I tell you what, when I appreciate those speed shields, because unlike what you said before, speeding is a choice. I don't think so. Not sometimes. It just happens. You're driving. Things are happening on the road, right? Somebody's coming over. Here comes the ramp. You know, I got to move over. I can't move. It's a difficult task sometimes to drive. So I don't think speeding is always a choice. It does happen in trying to navigate our roads. So why don't we have more speed shields up to help people know their speed and to slow down?
They're basic technology. They're radar related, and radar is not going to pick up. Have you seen it when you've seen multiple cars and it's bouncing back and forth and you don't know which car is going that fast? That's because of the radar technology. So you'll see it. It might be getting the car going away. It might be getting the one on two-way streets. On those bigger streets, you can't cover all the lanes with that technology.
So is this camera going to be able to, you know, these speed cameras, they're going to be able to show us early what the speed is on those shields. So we're coming down the street and there's cameras up there about a half block away. We're going to know, you know, we've got your speed or not.
Yeah, Dodge would not be a portable location because of that. But again, Dorian can talk to the technology of that. But the speed shields we have are just rudimentary radar technology. Well, they'll pick up two, but you see it'll going and coming when you see that. And you'll see it bouncing back and forth, and it's like you're looking at what's my speed, what's their speed, is that which one's going? So
So quick question. I'm sure you're familiar with what's going on in the state, and you know last year they had a lot of talk and it got out of committee. These are automated traffic cameras, Senate File 2352, and it talked about local authorities have to retain the data and utilize alternative measures prior to the implementation of an ATE system. Do we have a plan for alternate measures?
I guess my question would be, what is that?
Why, I'm asking you, you're the expert.
Yeah, I don't know what the legislative tried to identify as alternate measures, because in my world, alternate measures is police officers on that. And then there's also the speed shields.
Traffic
calming
calming things that you can
things,
do?
that's an engineering thing. There's different things with that. So, again, without knowing what they're actually
I'm just reading what it says.
No, I'm just curious what the defining of that was.
It says prior to implementing any system, and the specific location has to have data that establishes the need. I don't know what that means either, but they want that done before putting it in the cameras. In the specific location that it's used, implement at least one alternative measure that could improve safety for at least 6 months prior to the implementation of an ATE system. Now, that did not become law, but people are thinking about it, and we've had to change drastically what we've done because of the state. Now, are you familiar with this, what's going on in the state?
Yeah, that's part of what we're watching was the legislative side. So, and that's part of why I put that in there. We're watching what's going on with that. Like I said, it's been challenged. It hasn't come out yet. There's been just minor tweaks to the systems. And so, the big challenges, it seems like, have passed, and then this legislation gets introduced every year, and so far we haven't seen anything with that.
Thank you for your help, Mr. Mayor. I'm done for now.
Ms. Wether.
So I agree that many of my questions that were voiced to me by constituents have been answered, and so thank you for your presentation. A couple more contract-related questions, I think, for you, sir.
That's probably me.
How long is the average contract that a municipality has with you?
The standard contract, and this is industry-wide, is an initial term of 5 years, and then usually it's just a rollover, automatic one-year renewal unless the municipality just decides to terminate with 60 days notice.
What would happen if there would be some sort of a statewide legislative change that would not allow us to keep our contract with you?
There's language in every, at least in ours, that address all of that. If anything makes the program no longer legal in the state, then we just come pack the equipment up.
Okay.
It is not on the city at all.
Perfect, thank you. And do you as a vendor traditionally have a requirement for municipalities for a minimal enforcement line? So I had looked at Cedar Rapids numbers more specifically, noting, of course, and I appreciate your comments on the school zone areas, that a 1 to 5 over the speed limit does make a difference when you're asking drivers to slow down in those areas. Do you as a vendor require a specific number that you must start at in order for enforcement?
No, we don't.
Okay.
We don't. And I've never actually seen a program, and this includes Cedar Rapids, that cites anyone below 5 miles an hour. But what they're doing in their ordinance is not telling you what they're going to enforce at and showing you a fine schedule all the way down. I actually don't believe they enforce for less than 10 anywhere. And I have never seen any program in the United States enforce less than 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, except in a school zone, and the lowest I've seen in a school zone was 6, but most go, if they're going to go below that 10, go to 8. And for most of the reasons there, from doing the program, so long as that, you know, the statistic, that, you know, when they're in school zones for children and they're running in that 20-mile-an-hour zone, a lot of people ask, well, why is it 20? It's such a low speed. And it's basically from, I think it's the American Medical Association, but the study done on if a child is struck in a school zone at 20, they do have a 95% chance of surviving the incident. If you raise that to 40, they have a 5% chance. So it's in that 20-mile-an-hour range, so they're really trying to keep you down under 30. And so I've seen some dip below that to enforce, but I would say that the general speed camera program in the United States starts enforcement at 10 or above.
Okay. And one last question. Of the municipalities that your company serves, what is the smallest municipality?
Hazleton, Iowa.
And what's the population?
I think it's less than 300. It might be 200.
Really?
It's not a lot.
Do they have law enforcement officers there?
No. The sheriff's department has to administer the program for them.
Okay.
They just want it to be safe. As a matter of fact, they've given the sheriff's department most of their percentage. We took our 35, and then they had 65 left. And I know they gave a high percentage to the sheriff's office to monitor it because they just want people to slow down.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sprank?
Yeah, a couple more follow-up questions. So, Dorian, these are very advanced cameras. Clearly, there's one on another planet. You didn't show any pictures of what happens when it's snowy or rainy. I'm assuming the computers or the AI system can still see something when it's in bad weather?
Yeah, yes, it's actually, I mean, okay, you're not going to get people speeding in a hurricane or a blizzard, but if you did, the camera would catch it. It's IP65 rated, so the elements don't enforce it. We utilize our camera systems in northern Canada, so really cold, and in the Middle East, so I mean 140 plus degree temperatures. So yes, the elements won't. Fortunately, the elements, a lot of people, you know, when it gets really snowy like that, really rainy, I think people do start driving actually the way that the program's actually trying to get them to drive in off weather-related times. But the camera won't have a problem.
And we know these cameras won't affect our other cameras that we have going on. But with that being said, are we able to access the real-time live feed of it or not?
Yes, yes. Law enforcement, I mean, anyone they give access to would be able to, I mean, you could stream it to your television at home if you wanted to, or on your computer, but yes, you'd have access, everything the camera can do, the police department would have access to. So it's essentially, we're putting it in, but it's their camera. So they have access to whatever they want inside the camera. We can make that happen, and that is including the 24/7 live video feed or archivable video. So you can actually go back up to 30 days and look at video.
And then I guess my question, would we be, Mr. Van Milliken, would we be able to use this for possibly traffic counts? If that's running all the time or not, or?
Yes, it's counting every single object that goes by it, and it can actually classify vehicles. So if you wanted to know how many commercial vehicles versus passenger vehicles versus motorcycles went by, we could actually tell you and then break it down per lane. And then we could actually tell you the speeds of all of them, because we're tracking the speed and retaining the speed of every object that moves by. It's only pulling for police review the ones that are over that threshold, but the data is still in there and can be reported to you.
Ms. Russell, did you have more? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this question is for Mike. So what are we actually approving tonight? Are we approving the authorization to do an RFP and have an ordinance come before us? Because it seems like there's a lot of input to that ordinance that we would want to have as far as fees and, you know, is it going to be based on the speed or how many times they have had an infraction, or what exactly are we approving tonight?
So you would be approving to continue the process of the implementation of this program, which would include all the things you just said. So we would bring to the next city council meeting a draft ordinance that would have what we would recommend would have in it of those things you described. And then you would decide if those are the things you wanted in that ordinance.
Okay.
And then that, as I mentioned before, as your standard ordinance process is, you would have 3 readings of that ordinance. So it would come back to you on February 20th as the first reading. You would decide, okay, this is what we want it to say or not, and so we're going to change this and change that. And then the first meeting in March, you'd have the second reading. And then on March 20th, you would have the third reading and adopt an ordinance. Once you did that, we then would begin the process of things like a request for proposals to find out which vendor you're going to use and those kinds of things.
Okay, so a related question then for Chief. Do you think that there could be a deterrent factor in this kind of a process? You know, if people received higher fees as they had more and more repeat tickets? You know, as opposed to just every time you speed at 10 miles over, you pay X.
Yeah, and that, you know, I'd like to, like I said, I reached out to Waterloo today, but I know their chief is out. I kind of want to get that to see what their thought process was for that. I have not seen that before. I'm used to the traditional method. The faster you go, the more you get fined, you know, and I think there's some benefit to that because the simple fact is that if I'm only 10 over, I'm getting the same fine as somebody that's doing 50 over. I don't know if that's really a deterrent or what we're looking at with that. But I would like to research more of what Waterloo's thought process was on that.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one quick question. So Dorian, you had talked about the artificial intelligence. You had talked about the sharing of all the information with the chief and his staff, and then, of course, the snapshot, if you will, to the person that would be issued the citation. But you also mentioned that there's an enormous amount of other information per vehicle moving down in terms of counting the vehicles as well as information about the car, et cetera, ownership, et cetera. What happens to that database, or is it a proprietary database? Does it get stored in perpetuity? What do you do with those elements of the intelligence that you're gathering that are not used for the law enforcement citations?
Well, it's actually just a line of data. So we're not actually running each of those plates. There's not owner information on all those plates. That's the only ones that get run for owner information or registered owner information are the ones that are speeding, and then they're processed into a ticket. Mm-hmm. So as the camera goes, as a car goes by, you know, if it's not speeding, it just knows what type of vehicle that is, whether it's a big truck or a car or a motorcycle. Okay. And it's taking what speed it's going at and it's putting it on a line item. And so we can go back, the chief can go in there and get that data, which is just in a giant spreadsheet. So, you know, he could do most reports. When you talk about the traffic studies and everything, it would be one of our engineers that actually takes all that data and then processes that into a report for the chief saying, okay, because it's usually hundreds and hundreds of pages of data that we have to break down into columns for you. But we're not retaining personal information or even photos. That's just a data line. The images that are kept, like videos only kept for 30 days for them to review. It can be kept longer, but that's up to the department. That's just, as you may know, storage space. But the only images and personal data is kept are the ones that are in citations, and they're only kept through the adjudication process and then whatever the state mandates that you keep it afterwards.
And then how long do your line items remain in the database?
Infinitely.
Infinitely. Okay.
So if you had a program with us 15 years, you'd be able to go back and search data from year 1 to year 15.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Jones, did you have anything?
I don't have any questions. I have comments when we get to that
Then
part.
do you have any more questions, Mr. Resnick?
Just comments.
Just comments? Any other questions? All right, comment time.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Jones.
I have a lot of bias in this area, as I think you all know, having grown up in public safety, having spent 31 years at the fire department, all of them as a paramedic, many of them being with patients in the last minutes of life because of bad car crashes. Thousands of people actually in dire straits over that time. So I have some bias towards good traffic enforcement. I think it's essential Clearly, the City of Dubuque has the authority to do this. I'd say that we also have the duty to explore all technologies to do a good job of this. The first job of an elected official is the safety of the citizens. And this is all about that. And it's easy for people to send us emails and say, this is a money grab. It's not a money grab. It never was a money grab. I don't give a damn if we make a nickel on this. I want people to slow down and be safe. I want to slow myself down a little bit sometimes and be safer. But that's the fact. Since I've been on city council, calls about speeding motorists outnumber every single other call. Don't have a statistical review of this, but by a lot. Every week there are 3 or 4 people that call me and say, man, I live down in Rockdale, I live here, I live there. Cars are just flying past you, we've got to do something about that. Now, very significantly, recently we had a communication from the North End Neighborhood Association. Not one person, a cluster of people, very concerned about speeds on Central Avenue through their neighborhood. There are some homes where people are trying to raise kids and live, where if you step out the front door, you only have to walk about 14 feet to the traffic lane. They're that close. There's about 3 feet of sidewalk, about 9 feet of parking lane, and then there's cars whizzing past them at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour in a 25 mile an hour zone. That's a problem. And they were looking for, can you lower the speed limit? I don't think we can. We had that conversation. But I think we can do this, and I think this is all we can do, because you can't safely stage patrol vehicles to do the traffic stops. There's no place to park them to watch for the speeders. So at the volume of traffic going past, to catch up to the violator is a challenge. And now you've got a problem of where do you actually perform the stop? How do you successfully get the patrol vehicle and the offending vehicle out of the traffic into a position of safety and keep everybody safe till the stop is concluded? And how many cars are whizzing past you while you do all of that? Now, if we were Los Angeles or Chicago or New York City or Dallas, and you had a problem with an area like Central Avenue where you've got a speed issue, you could throw 20 cars at it per shift for a week, and you could probably quell most of your speed issue. We can't put 20 cars on it. We can't put 2 cars on it because we haven't got the human resource, we haven't got the physical resource, and because the calls for service are running so high that it just simply can't be done. So what can you do? You can reach into technology and find what's working many, many other places in North America, including many places in Iowa. Lastly, I think I did my 5 points that I want to say. Lastly, it's about safety. It's only about safety. It was all it was ever about was safety. And I appreciate the positions of people that are writing us and saying it's not about that. And I wish they'd pay attention to the documents that we've read. I wish they'd pay attention to the things that were said tonight in the presentations. I wish they'd sign up for the Citizens Police Academy and learn what it's like from that position of view. As opposed to sitting at home on their computers. And the people that just wanted to call me names this week, too bad. I don't know what you wanted in the first place, but I'm still here. I'm still supporting this because it's the right thing to do to improve the safety of the people driving down the street. There's poor people on Central Avenue with 14 feet between their front door and the traffic. We better manage that traffic. The Northwest Arterial, we can't have 75, 85, 95 mile an hour speeds. We just can't. People get hurt. Things go wrong. And things happen. I remember when they first raised the speed limit across Nebraska and how great I thought that was. I used to make a lot of trips to Colorado with family out there. Man, at 85 miles an hour, stuff happens fast. Of course, the speed limit was 75 miles an hour, but if you didn't want to get rear-ended, you drove 85 miles an hour. And I think that's one of the concerns that I heard here tonight is that ambient traffic flow can cause you to speed when you don't really care to, but you don't feel safe not doing it. It's just in the Chicago suburbs. I get that. But here's a situation where we got to do something. And here's a substantial something that addresses it. How do we not do it? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Resnick.
Yes, thank you. I have to first off tell you that I tend to agree with the group that Mr. Jones is a part of also, and that's the Iowa ACLU, which is against this, speed cameras. And they're heavy-handed. Why? Well, 99% of the citations have no correlating collision. We just have a scatter shot, and we just try to get everybody. And yes, heavy-handed things work. You could all make your own list of heavy-handed things that work, but is that the right way to do it? So if it's not a goal priority, you can see we spent so many hours over a brief talk. We didn't get a work session. We didn't tell folks about this 3 months ahead. We didn't collect all the data like we should. So I guess I have problems with this. There is, the chief had next steps. If approved, then all these things will happen. Well, they need to happen before we approve them, because as Ms. Roussel pointed out, or got them to admit, once they're in your community, they ain't leaving. They're going to be here, and this will be the mayor and council that gets speed cameras in Dubuque. Okay, and it'll always be such. So, first of all, it's not a goal priority. Imagine Dubuque, 6,000 citizens, nobody asks for speed cameras. A couple things. I would love to think it's not a money grab, and I wouldn't say it's a money grab, but there's a money issue. And if there was no money issue, I'm like the chief. I would say, I'm not worried about the money. We should give the money to charity. How about United Way? But as part of Mr. Van Milligan's presentation, he's got all these uses for critical, integral parts of city operations. So the money is used for funding city operations. So it's not that we don't care and we don't care about the money. It's only safety. No, we've got uses for it, and it'll never go away. We'll always have these traffic safety issues and costs. So we're going to be using them for those things, I guess. The other thing is, I guess. Well, let me wrap it up here in just a couple things. First of all, the S-curve in Cedar Rapids, I get how that could be appropriate. We don't have any S-curve on 380 going, 55 miles an hour. We don't have a situation like that. So that might be appropriate. But for all those different things that I've mentioned tonight that we're not ready for, and the statement was made, no cost to the city. Well, our citizens are the city of Dubuque. And they're going to be, if they drive like everybody else in Iowa or similar, we're going to have millions of dollars collected by these ticket cameras and not spent on local restaurants, local arts and events, local businesses. $100 means it's very different for some people than others here in Dubuque. And for some people, it's $100. Oh, well. I tip that much at a certain restaurant. I don't know. But for others, that is a calamity. We haven't gone through, we have this fines and fees committee that hasn't been consulted. How can we see these cameras through an equity lens? Well, we don't know. We haven't done our due diligence. I think it's funny, we have speed cameras and we're speeding this through way too fast. Citizens, Chamber of Commerce, ask us to delay this, maybe. I'm not going to move to the table yet till I hear everybody's idea that there might be something to that. But again, finally, usually we are prepared by the staff to say, here's what's coming. And they let us really consider this. And now we get everything, we got a lot of stuff from the city manager today. And we get no presentations. I mean, the presentations weren't included. It is going way too fast for as huge as this is going to be for our citizens in Dubuque. I'm all for safety. We need to do it the right way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Other final thoughts? Ms. Roussel.
Sure. When I came in, I wasn't sure. Because I had, as I said earlier, I had a lot of questions. But I really appreciated the presentations answering those questions. And when it didn't, I was able to ask them. In addressing one of Mr. Resnick's concern, one thing I liked was adding to the next steps a reporting process so that periodically we can review this. And if we feel it's not effective, we will have the opportunity to talk about it again. I like the opportunity to review the ordinance when it comes and have that discussion. I'd like to see it take the full 3 readings so that there's additional time for that review and input. And so I'm going to support this, but I'm going to be watchful as we're going through the process to make sure that any additional questions that I have are answered and that we're building in reporting and making sure that this is not only a good impact on our safety and that it's effective and that we can show our citizens that it is effective. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Wethel.
I'll begin just by saying I consider the health and safety of my constituents my priority. I consider the safety of our uniformed officers my priority. I think this action item is in line with these priorities. Respectfully, if this passes tonight, I will plan to consider support for the final ordinance if we can consider the revenue created by the ordinance is committed more directly to the recruitment and retention of our first responders, police, fire, 911 dispatch. I doubt nothing about your presentation, Chief. I appreciate all of the time and energy you've put into this, and Mr. Van Milligan and your staff. I had a lot of questions, and a lot of those questions literally came up for me in the last 24 hours, and I feel like I would like more time to process it. It feels as though there is enough concern voiced by my constituents that I need to pause and further consider recommendations overall. A more in-depth examination of other cities' policies and experiences outside of what Cedar Rapids data showed us would be very helpful for me. I'm curious about other ways of encouraging behavior change to moderate speed. I would be in favor of returning to the discussion after I feel that there has been a more broad opportunity to consider data and review it myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sprink, I look both ways at the same time. Mr. Sprink. Ms. Farber.
Well, I agree with my colleagues here that we do need a bit more time in order to digest all this great information that we have received, and also to step up to the constituent needs, if you will, and requests and interest that has been expressed tonight as well. And Jeremy, I really hope that in that list of to-dos we do put some kind of a group together, whether it's just a town hall or a commission specifically to help monitor and work with you on the design. I think that's just a step in the right direction. And I support this, but I do agree that, you know, maybe we do take time and do it in 3 readings to give us more time for helping you, as a matter of fact, as you go through this step too, because for you to do this in 2 weeks is a very short period also. So I think that would be good guidance coming in both directions, if you will, to make this collaborative and to work to the best interest of everyone. So I will support this, and I look forward to the phased-in approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sprink.
As the councilman who threw out a crazy idea a month ago of slowing down traffic, and that was shot down, that was one ordinance we have power over. Now we're creating an ordinance because folks don't want to slow down. Romberg, Kaufman, Peru Road, 32nd Street, Sheridan, Roosevelt, Lincoln, Garfield, Jackson, Central, and White are the 11 streets I've gotten calls on that rotate around. And I will send an email. And then they'll eventually, the enforcement ideas that we have used, we'll put up one of those little mobile speed thingies. That'll last for 30 days. People slow down. Then it goes away. Then they don't slow down. I don't know what to do anymore. I frankly don't. We just want to be safe. We don't want any of our families to get hurt. We don't want any of our kids to get hurt. We've asked people to slow down. We've tried to throw it.
this is the last thing. And I'm sorry if it sounds a little heavy-handed. It seems like this is the only option we're left with. So I'm in full support of this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yeah, Mr. Jones.
Just a final comment. A dear friend of mine who's kind of a senior statesman said, good policy often is not good politics, but good governance requires good policies. And that's the challenge before you today.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start my comments by just thanking everybody for this evening. I mean, you look at the clock. We've been here a while talking about this. And I have some comments on the process of it, I think, too, as part of my comments here. But I appreciate the depth with which we as a council, and you in particular as council members and my colleagues, want to explore an issue such as this. Anybody who says that we don't listen to them, I think is just proved wrong by a discussion like this. I've heard you ask the same questions that I saw coming through in email, very specifically. So I appreciate the discussion that you've just had. Chief Jensen, and to you and your entire force, I really appreciate you taking the time to be able to take a look at this. Mr. Grubaugh, thank you for being here tonight and sharing with your expertise with us as well. And of course, Mike and your team, as a part of this proposal. I'm just going to be pretty bluntly honest about this, because this is not the last time we're talking about cameras and technology and artificial intelligence in this chamber. This is going to come up again, and it's going to come up fairly soon. And if I'm being honest with everybody, I got to tell you, as a citizen of a free and democratic society, I do feel uneasy about the expansion of artificial intelligence and technology and its use in surveillance of us as people, as residents of a city or residents of a country or anywhere. It makes me uneasy. It started when I read 1984 in high school, I'll be honest with you. And then I became a huge science fiction fan, and I'm telling you, those stories, they scare you. But I get this, the reason that those stories stick with me is because we have seen examples over and over again of humans behaving badly when they use this technology. We can name all kinds of them. I mean, on a large global scale, we can talk about countries that have abused this. There's a new Frontline documentary out that just came out a couple weeks ago about a spy software that a bunch of countries used and started spying on journalists. And actually use them to kill people. I mean, it's horrible what can happen with some of these things when they're abused and used poorly. Those are the concerns that I hear when I listen to people who, some of the people who wrote us today. Some of them more appropriately than others, I might add, in the way that they express their opinions. But I get the reason for those opinions. I mean, it is a concern when your government is watching you for whatever reason. It's a constitutional concern. So I want to put that out there, that this is something we always have to think about when we talk about using technology to do the job that humans have done for a very long time. But it really just comes down to that statement, when with great power comes great responsibility. I mean, that's really what this is about. If we are to move this forward, we have to do it very responsibly. And I have to tell you, I mean, what I've heard here tonight is an outline of how we have a police department and a city staff and us here as policymakers who are ready to do the responsible thing with this particular proposal and try to do this in the best way that we possibly can. And I believe in the people who are saying that. I believe in our ability to do this in a responsible fashion. Mr. Resnick, I'm going to disagree with you on one thing on the ACLU comment you made. I've read a lot from the ACLU as well about this, and there's also the Brennan Center for Justice. There's some other sources that I've looked into to try and figure this whole thing out. It's going to come up again because they talk a lot more about things that are even more automated than these license plate readers. It's not that the ACLU and these groups entirely disagree with this technology. What they want to make sure is that it's done responsibly, that we put things in place, safeguards in place, to make sure that we are using this technology in a way that is not going to violate the rights of people who haven't done anything wrong. So I'm interested when I hear things like, are we gathering information on people who are not breaking the law? Well, yes and no. It's kind of the answer we got tonight. We're gathering information on cars that are driving by. But if nobody's doing anything wrong, then we're not going to be doing anything with that information other than keeping it to be able to look and see, like, how many people were speeding all at once, right? Or how many people were going a certain speed on a certain roadway. If we're going to do this, it has to be about safety. It cannot be about revenue. I believe that is the reason that we are doing it. That's what I heard here tonight. We're doing this about safety. This is not about making a buck. Here's the deal, though. We're going to make revenue on this. That's the way this also works. So I don't want to just gloss over that. There will be revenue coming our way. So how we spend them, as well, you pointed out some specific ideas on that, I think is going to be really important. So we have to think about what we're going to do with that. We're going through my notes here, and they're super tiny, so excuse me. I think the decision tonight is actually the easy one. Do we move forward with this discussion? I say the answer for me is yes. I do think that it's time to move forward with this discussion. If we had this to do over again, I think we should have had a work session first. If we had the process to do over again, I think it's something to learn from here, because I do think it would have been good to have some sort of an idea, throw this out there for everybody to talk about, and then we can discuss it a little bit more and bring it to the table for a decision. But I also don't think that this was a terrible way of starting this discussion. We had a very thorough one this evening. I do think we should slow this down, have 3 readings of an ordinance if we're going to move forward with an ordinance, so that we can refine that, talk about the best way to do it. As we refine that, there are some things that I think are really important. We need to talk about how we're going to report this data and what that's really going to look like. I would really like to hear some clear ideas about what those reports are going to look like, what data we're going to capture, how we're going to talk to the public about this, how we're going to audit our processes and our information. I think those things are incredibly important as we discuss how we're going to do this. It's not just about putting signs up to say, you're being tracked by a speed camera, so slow down. I want to know exactly how this is working. And I think, looking at this quarterly for a year, or at least, 2 times in 1 year, and then maybe annually after that, makes a lot of sense. Because I do think that we have to think about making sure that what we're doing is actually working. I also want to know a little bit more about who's going to access the data, how they're going to access this data. We got some answers on, depending on who we go with, after we put an RFP out, how long this data will be saved. I think those things, and then how we're going to protect it so people that do access that aren't able to do anything that would be, aren't able to abuse that power that they have. Specifically the police officers that are looking at this. I think the public needs to know that if we're going to do this, we have practices in place that don't allow abuse. Along with that, just the transparency to make sure that everything is, that the people know how this works. They know what we're going to set it at as far as what speed you're going to be able to go. Just so they have a general comfort and understanding of what that really looks like. Know where all these are. We're not going to surprise people. We're going to announce we're going to be moving these ones around that can move around. I think all of that is something that we need to make sure that we do as we look through all this. And then, the biggest question as we look through these reports is, does it work? Is it doing what we want it to do? What is our goal? If the goal is to reduce speeding by, let's just say 50%, because that's the number that was thrown out tonight, we need to track that on a regular basis and make sure that's actually working. The final point is one that Mr. Resnick brought up that is absolutely apropos. The Iowa legislature goes after these every single year. So whatever we do, we need to do with our eyes fully wide open and recognize that we may be having lots of discussion. We may be up pretty late tonight, and by the end of this legislative session have absolutely no power to do anything about this. We need to recognize that that's a possibility. I don't think that precludes us from having the discussion, though. I actually think that this right here, this discussion that we started tonight, can be a model for what our legislature can look at to say, maybe this is a way that a city can do this right. They talk about this in depth. We move this forward in a way that the public gets really good input. I don't see any problem with that. If that's something that in the end our community wants, then we should be able to move forward with it. And I don't think that should be up to the Iowa legislature. So I'm going to support this. I'm going to support this, and my mind wasn't made up coming in here tonight. I really did, and because of this unease that I have with just surveillance in general. But I do want to continue this conversation. I would like to see an ordinance in front of us, and then be able to slowly move through that so we can have a full discussion as a community. So I think each of us has said our piece. I think we've been talking about this for quite a while. Again, appreciate the discussion. So with that, I'm going to go back to, we had a motion by Jones and a second by Sprank to receive and file and approve. And Adrian, would you call the roll, please?
Jones.
Aye.
Sprank.
Aye.
Wethel.
Nay.
Resnick. Farber.
Aye.
Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Roussel.
Aye.
That motion passes 5-2.
Action item number 4 is Terry Good.